Well, hello to all of my methodical researchers out there. This video is about reading cases. So why a separate video on reading cases and why now? We've already went over the fundamentals of researching cases. We've talked about our general strategy. We try to find cases during preliminary analysis and during the codified law step of our process by using statutory annotations. And then we use those good cases to find more cases. First by looking at what our good cases cite within their opinions, and then by using the headnotes to see what other cases address those same legal issues. But one thing we can definitely determine about this strategy, or really about any strategy for finding cases, is that it is going to involve lots and lots of reading. So much reading. These cases can be super long, and even when a case is relevant, much of what it contains will inevitably be distracting because it is just so tangential to our overall purposes. It really helps to have a strategy for reading cases that, number one, avoids wasting time on all of this mostly irrelevant material, and number two, doesn't miss anything important. We always want to avoid surprises. So first of all, we want to think about how we might use a case as we read that case. Is this a type 1 case that seems helpful for the way it states a legal rule or standard? Or is it a type 2 case that is more interesting to us due to the factual comparisons we might make? These are not mutually exclusive categories, so you might have a case that could be great as type 1 and as type 2, but it does give us a useful way of thinking about the purposes of our research activities. It also really shapes the way that you would approach reading a case. So if you're checking out a type 1 case, you're probably going to head straight to the section where the court just tells us the relevant rule or standard. On the other hand, if you're looking at a type 2 case, you'll need to read the parts where the court describes the facts, which are usually at the beginning of the opinion, and the parts where the court applies the law to those facts, which are going to be a little later. The headings and titles that the opinion uses can really help you to find what you want in this situation, so make sure that you pay special attention to those. And you also want to be mindful of your overall strategy when you're reading cases. How do we think that this case fits into the overall picture? So if we are reading a type 1 case, we would want to note the various ways that different courts and different opinions might phrase the relevant legal rule or standard. What do those differences signify? Is there a particular phrasing or formulation of the legal rule that seems more favorable to our position? And if we're reading a type 2 case, we might ask ourselves where this case fits into the universe of factually similar cases. Is it a good case for us, better than the ones that we've already identified? Or is it something that seems really unfavorable for our position? Is it an outlier, or does it go with the main trend of the decisions that you've seen? In addition, when reading a case like this, you'll want to try to figure out why this particular case might have turned out differently or turned out similarly. And with all of this stuff, I would really encourage you to take, careful and detailed notes in your legal research plan, because it's just so tough to hold it all in your head. There's just so much information. And because you also want to make sure that the results of your research are as user-friendly as possible. Finally, you want to make sure that you are being as quick and efficient as possible when you are reading cases for your research. I recommend that you approach reading cases in 3 passes. So in your first pass, you'll rely on the synopsis and the headnotes of the cases to just quickly weed out the ones that aren't relevant, the ones that aren't helpful to your research. You'll just ask yourself, does this case pass the smell test? is this case going to be helpful? Once you are done with that first pass and you move on to your second pass over the cases, you'll know the cases at least seem to be relevant. They at least seem to be helpful, so you'll spend more time reading them. You'll use the head notes to navigate directly to that part of the text, of the opinion itself, that contains what you want to use in order to learn more about it in its context. And here, in the second pass, you might find yourself eliminating some of the cases that you found, but your most important task will probably be evaluating the relative significance of these cases. Which case is the most important? Which case is the most favorable? Which is the most unfavorable? This is also a good time to think about the parts of the opinion, the passages that you may want to directly quote or use, and go ahead and highlight or copy those. And at the end of this second pass, you should have a pretty good idea of which cases you'd like to use and which are going to be more like, relief pitchers or backup cases. And then on your third and final pass over the cases, for each of those cases that you would like to use, you need to go ahead and just read the entire opinion. That includes all of the stuff that just seemed totally irrelevant that you skipped in those first and second passes, because we want to make sure that we're not missing something important that might potentially affect the applicability or analysis of the case. We just don't want any surprises. Surprises are bad. So yeah, there it is, reading cases. Being smart about the way that you read cases is honestly just as important as any other element of your research strategy. So just be sure that you read them purposefully, that you read cases strategically, and that you read them efficiently. Okay, that's all I have for now. Until next time.